Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bass, and today we've got a bonus video for you. Today we're doing a Saturday video for the second part of our ICAST gear review. There were so many things to cover, we couldn't possibly do it in the video earlier this week. So today we're talking hard baits, soft baits, terminal tackle, all the good stuff from ICAST. Let's jump into it. If you missed our review a few days ago, we did a gear review of our favorite rods and reels from ICAST, from brand new companies coming to market, budget gear, all the way up to the highest end gear that you can get. But it was such a big video that we didn't have time to even begin to cover the baits. So today is a bonus video and we're covering all the baits. Now even this is just a drop in the bucket. ICAST is a giant show. There's an incredible amount of product that is released at or around ICAST. So we gathered up a bunch of our favorites from the show, and there was so much good stuff there. I think there was more innovation, more unique things, more important things launched at this show than probably any other that I've ever attended. I was very impressed. Now, I got my hands on as much as I could. There are still a lot of things from this show that we couldn't even get our hands on yet. So there will be yet another, maybe even 2 more videos over the next month or 2 covering more of those new releases. But we do our best. I mean, it's insane how much comes out. And then we're looking for the gems, the best of the best, the standouts, the things that we think will help you as an angler catch more fish, catch bigger fish, save money, dial in your fishing, all sorts of different reasons that each one of these found their way into this. But this is a hodgepodge of the things that we felt were important. All right, let's kick this thing off with the bigger baits first. We've got big baits, we've got micro baits, Bait Finesse baits, soft plastics. I mean, you name it. We've got to start somewhere. And this is just a mix of the things that we feel are valuable. There are thousands of products that come out at the show, and the vast majority of them don't make the cut. Either we think they're gimmicks, they're ripoffs, they are great ideas, but they're not quite right. I mean, there's 1,000 reasons that something doesn't make its way into a video. There's only a handful of things that make the cut, and there's usually going to be something very specific about a product that caught Tim's or my eye, that got us to latch onto it. Because you're just walking that show, something has to make you stop and say, let me see that one. So I'm going to walk you through those things. Not all of these are going to stand out to you, but some of them I'm sure will, because this really is the cream right off the top from that show. The first one is from Bait Sanity. This is the Chimera Shad. It's a glide bait, and a very unique bait at that. Now, Bait Sanity has a lot of history. They made the Explorer, the big trout, years ago that I've crushed giant fish with. Their Bluegill, if that's not a bait you throw, is an amazing bluegill glide. Probably my favorite bluegill glide at any price from anywhere on the market. Just an incredible bait. So it should be no surprise that when they took a shot at a shad glide, that it would be an absolute winner. This bait completely caught me off guard. I mean, I knew it was going to be a shad glide. I assumed it was going to be good. You know, it's got that like paintbrush material type tail on it, great shad profile, swiveling hook hangers, but not only that, they're recessed swiveling hook hangers. I mean, there's obviously a lot of thought here, but this was done as a project between Bait Sanity and Tackle Warehouse. So some of the guys at Tackle Warehouse actually had input on it. And we got to pick some of their brains as well and kind of get their feedback on what they were going for. But none of that matters until I take that bait and throw it in the water and see for itself. And I will tell you flat out, when I threw this bait in the water, mind blown. Mind blown. Best glide that I've seen swim in a long, long time. They described it in the literature online, the videos online, as a chopping style glide, right? So I'm expecting to have to work this bait to get it to cut. And it does that great. It was everything I thought it was going to be. It's a really dialed in, really good glide. They're using a system where basically you throw this thing into the water and it's going to float for a second until water gets inside the channels in the bait. It's supposed to have water go through it, and then it becomes all but neutral. So it takes just a second to fill up, and then it's like truly a neutral bait. However, I fish it with some upsized hardware myself. I set it up immediately for the way that I fish. So for me, it fishes perfectly like a foot to 2 foot down. I was chopping it, doing those things, working that bait, just getting a feel for it. But then I made a cast that I wasn't happy with, and I went to burn it back to the boat. And this thing on a straight swim, I mean, normally glides will blow out or they'll, you know, they just sort of flip flop over. This thing on a straight retrieve back to the boat when I was burning it is swimming like this back to the boat on a straight retrieve. I mean, mind-blowing. It is so far beyond what I expected from it, and I had high expectations. The colors are legit. Like, I know that this camera is going to do nothing for this color, but this is a matte bone, but then the gill plates are not matte. The gill plates are pearlescent, and I've seen 3 of the colors, and they all just are absolutely amazing. They did such a good job with that glide. If you are a big glide guy, you know, if you like the Spro, that's that same category. And I'm sure a lot of people saw those tails and they're thinking they're very similar baits. I'm glad that there was one laying here. Let me show you. I'll just give you a profile difference. So here you're about an inch longer, I would say. The body thickness, maybe a 1/4 inch thicker. Completely different joint cuts, completely different hook positions, but both super fishy. If this is a bait you haven't thrown, this is an incredible glide too. Just probably the most popular glide out there. Well, I shouldn't say probably, it is. The KGB is probably the most popular glide there is. The Spro KGB, I mean, they just can't even keep them on shelves. It's insane. But this bait, from a function standpoint and a swim standpoint, I mean, 100% has my attention. Just an unbelievable bait. Both of these are great options, and I think nationally this style of glide has completely caught the attention of the market, and this is a bait you need to see. Next one up. This is a bait we talked about in one other video, and I promised that I would follow it with a gear review. We actually decided not to do that gear review about a month ago because, quite frankly, there wasn't that much cool stuff that came out late spring this year. The Classic had some awesome stuff. After that, it just sort of dwindled along, and if there's not cool stuff, I don't care that things are coming to market. If they're not awesome, if they don't blow our minds, if they're not going to do something special for you, we cancel that. We have no interest in it. So that video didn't happen, so this has been waiting until post ICAST, and now there's like so much to talk about. It's crazy. But this is the JSJ Loose Caboose. These are 2 colors, same bait. I'm so happy with this bait. JSJ, Josh St. John, builds this bait, and this is, in my mind, about as perfect of a shad imitating open water, bottom contact type swim bait as you're going to get. Really did an amazing job with this bait. It's durable, super durable. Again, we've covered it before. You guys have seen us catching fish on them. You know how much we love the burrito. The burrito comes in a 5 and a 6. This comes just a little bit bigger. And that's a big deal for me. It's important to have those size classes. This lands for me halfway between a burrito and a mag draft. It fishes right in between them. If you like those styles of baits, you like this style of bait too. Single jig hook on top, super durable bait, great swim slow, great swim fast. It's got a really good position on bottom. In other words, I'm bottom crawling this bait really effectively. bumping bottom out in deep water, crawling, but I'm also fishing it really well, skipping it under docks too. It's doing both really well. Again, jig hook. So mag draft, I've got my belly hook. Here I've got my jig hook. Burrito, I've got my smaller sizes covered. For me, it's 1, 2, 3. Those baits just all fish together and really do a great job of covering my bases. But I'm so happy with that JSJ Loose Caboose. And if you guys aren't familiar, if you haven't seen one of these videos, if you have, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to listen for just a second. We link all of these products in the video description, so you don't have to try and find them. You don't have to try and memorize the names of them or write down our favorite colors, you know, all those things that people do. Below the video, if you scroll down, there's a description. And depending on what platform you're watching on, if you're on our website, if you're on tacticalbassin.com, scroll down, it's right there. If you're on YouTube, you have to hit more right below the video to open the rest of the description. You might even have to hit more again, depending on your device, or 3 little dots to open that description. But that description will have all of these things in the order that we talk about them, with exact links to them on Tackle Warehouse. And we also give you our favorite colors for every single one of them, because we want you, I mean, you don't have to use those colors if they don't speak to you, but I want you to know what timber I like, so that if you're trying to, you know, you see us fishing a bait in a situation and you have the same situation, you need to know what color we're throwing. So we always link that exact color or a couple of our favorite colors, whatever makes most sense to help you out. So again, that's in this description and every other description of every video we do. Next one up. This is cool. This one, best of show in its category. This is ZMan's new chatterbait. The ZMan Chatterbait Elite Evo. I've got one out of package here. Awesome colors, first off. I'm very impressed with this bait. I totally understand why it won best of show. ZMan has got a bunch of chatterbaits out. I mean, I don't know how many there are. There's a bunch of variations. The jackhammer, by far the most popular, at least from my viewpoint it is. Fish catching machine. I mean, I caught an 11-pounder on one this spring. It is a fish catcher, but I'm really glad to see another version come out. They've done some things tangibly different here. It's a little bit different head shape. And I read all the literature on it. When we were at the show, I talked to all the guys about it. Like, I wanted to know everything about why this bait. Got to talk to the designers of the bait and really kind of get a feel for what's different here, why it stands out. First thing that stands out, price tag. It's like $9.99 or $9.95, something like that. I mean, it brought the chatterbait back down to very affordable, which is amazing by itself. The blades themselves come in a bunch of really cool designs, whether those are colored blades or, in this case, clear blades with glitter in them. Well, not clear, sorry. Glitter blades with like a clear epoxy or a resin or something over the top of them to hold that glitter on there. Super unique. Unique head design that they said really allows this bait to break loose. So the thing that makes a chatterbait special, makes one chatterbait more special than, you know, a random bladed jig, is its ability to hunt and to cut out, and also its startup speed. So this bait has an incredible startup speed. I mean, right there with the jackhammer. Its ability to cut out, to move, to dart is phenomenal. It's a little bit narrower head, which I think tends to let it roll even more and get that hunting action. And that random hunt is what gets bass to react. In addition to the unique blade colors, you've got amazing skirt colors. Like that is electric shad. You guys know how much we like electric shad. I think that was genius to bring over into the chatterbait line. And there's a bunch of other really good ones too. Like, what do they call that one? Glitter bomb. That one looks super good too. They had a Bama brim that looks really good. And then they use this 3-part keeper. Super stout hook. I mean, I don't know, but to me, it looks like the jackhammer hook. It's at least very, very similar. But a 3-part keeper where you've got lead, then you've got a wire keeper, then you've got lead again. And in the stuff I read, what they were going for was like the ultimate keeper to be able to hold those Z-Man type plastics on, the really stretchy plastics in place. But I can tell you, lead with that wire is hands down the best for any plastic. And then that extra one back there is probably what they're talking about for those Z-Man plastics specifically. But that's a phenomenal keeper system that's going to help those trailers last a long time. I mean, I look at this and just see upgrades everywhere, no downgrades except in price, which, unreal. Next one up. Super stoked on this one too. I'm stoked on all of these, that's why they're here, but this one is a big deal. You guys know how much I love dirty jigs. Tim and I have so much history with dirty jigs. This is the Dirty Jigs Finesse swim jig, okay? This is the new Dirty Jigs Compact swim jig, which needed to happen years ago. This is genius. I love the compact pitching jig. I love the compact flipping jig. I'm so happy to see that hook come into the swim jig, because what you've got, I wanted to give you a side-by-side comparison. It's a little thicker skirt than the true finesse swim jig, okay? But when I flip those skirts and show you the hook, that's where the magic happens. It's actually slightly shorter shanked than even the finesse swim jig, but it's slightly heavier wire. So it is small, but super strong. And that needed to happen. This is an amazing swim jig that I think will probably be the best swim jig for a lot of people because it's a relatively full profile, but a very small hook, but a very, very stout hook, and that is key. I did the first thing anybody's gonna ask. I already went out and did the legwork. I played with every trailer under the sun to find the perfect pairing for this one, because every single swim jig, every time there's a variation, the perfect trailer is different. There's half a dozen that I expect it will be one of, but hands down for this bait, it is the Storm Largo Shad 3.5. The 3-inch doesn't have the action. I mean, it looks good, but it doesn't just pop and turn mind-blowing. The second you go to the 3.5, mind-blowing. Leave the little tab in, okay? These are the little details that matter. I don't want you to just buy the swim jig and have it be like every other. I'm gonna tell you exactly what we're doing that makes this such a big deal for us. So that is the setup. That color, by the way, is Tactical Shad. That skirt color on that jig, that's a color Tim and I designed years ago. That setup right there has so much wobble. Just on a straight retrieve, you just throw it out and you just wind it back, and it has so much wobble. That skirt is pulsing. It looks incredible on its own with no additional action from you or the rod, and it will just catch them on its own. And that's the key with a swim jig. You want to find a trailer that will wag the dog. You want the tail to wag the dog without you having to do it with the rod. And if you can find that, you're set. This is an awesome pairing on an awesome swim jig. All right, next one up from Spro. I think they call this the Haint. It's a topwater bait, okay? Very unique bait. I got my hands on them because of the sound. We were in the Spro booth, I heard the sound, and I was like, hey, you gotta let us get a couple of these, right? We're in there trying to talk our way into some baits in the middle of the show. So, pretty standard. I mean, it's a unique profile, but overall pretty standard, right? It's a unique shape to a familiar size for a walking topwater, but it's got a really good sound. It's loud. Very, very loud. But what's cool, once we really looked at it, is this. They've got a couple of colors made out of the bone material, so it's a different material. This is already a cool bait. I mean, good sound, good walk, really cool bait. But when you switch to that bone, even louder, even more obnoxious. I mean, it's ridiculous. When you're up north, smallmouth fishing in particular, there is something about those obnoxious baits that will get a fish to swim like 40 feet just to massacre it. They just come farther for those loud, obnoxious baits on the like stormy, nasty days. And that bone, the second I heard it, I was like, oh man, that is different. I need that bait. Other people need that bait. That's really cool. Like this one's cool, but that version is even cooler. And again, we'll link in the video description which ones. They don't list whether or not they're bone, I don't think, but we'll list out the couple that had that louder sound. All right, next one up. Complete opposite direction. We're going tiny. From ICAST. You never know what you're going to see at the show. This is the Baby Kira. It's a wake bait. Well, it says wake. For me, in my own fishing, it's really not a wake bait. It floats, so if I stop, it floats up. But really, it fishes maybe 6 to 8 inches under the surface. This little guy, I came home. This was the first thing I bought after ICAST. I wasn't even home yet. I got back to the hotel the first night of the show after we were in the ICAST and Fish Arrow booth, and I saw these, and I just sat on Tackle Warehouse and just bought a pile of them. I really like them. You guys know I like Bait Finesse, so that's what I had in mind, right? Ultralight bait casting tackle, but this fish great on a spinning rod as well, but it's a tiny little bait with a phenomenal swim, plus it's got this tiny little blade on it. Just on my first, like, what's this bait going to look like cast, where you flip it and kind of drag it by you and just look at it to see what you're in for, I had a fish come up and eat it. Kid you not. So it's got this little tiny blade. It's got a little wake bait lip, soft tail, 2 hooks, one that hangs down and one that is sort of clipped on that soft tail, holding it in place. The bait has an awesome, it reminds me of like, I don't know, like an old school Rapala or something. It's got an awesome little jointed body swim to it, but just with incredible detail in the paint job. Plus it's got the shine of that blade whipping around underneath it. And it's just, there's something about this size bait, especially as we go into fall, when bass get difficult to catch during transitions, I turn to micro little baits. And that was why I'd never even seen it in the water. I picked this up in the booth. Tim and I saw this package in the booth, looked at him, and we both were like, for sure. Never even saw it in the water, and I ordered a stack of them for myself because I already knew. I knew what this bait was going to do. If it fished anywhere near the surface, if it fished within 3 feet of the surface, it was going to play in my wheelhouse, period. And I have been very, very impressed with it. It's not for everybody. Not everyone wants to fish 5, 6, 7 pound fluorocarbon on a spinning rod or a bait caster. But some people do. And if you're one of those guys, that is a super cool little bait. The Baby Kira Wake by ICAST. Next one up. I don't know how many favorites I'm allowed to have at the same time, but here's another favorite. So stoked on this bait. I really am. You guys know how much we like the Jackal Kiara. One of my favorite frogs of all time. And in the last year or two, my personal favorite. It's the one that I pick up first in most situations. Since we moved east, I do more damage on a Kiara than probably any other frog. I still throw a lot of frogs, but I just have so much confidence. So I was so stoked to see this one come out. This is the Kiara S2 Beat. This one has got 2 little Colorado blades in the back, mounted. I'll show you. This is a Kiara. There's the S2 Beat. They're mounted on like an extra little dropper wire, and they're cool. So I noticed, the first thing I noticed when I got my hands on one in person at the show was that they're a little bit softer too. I mean, the hookup ratio, phenomenal. So good. The Kiara is already incredible. So the S2 Beat, you can do 2 things with it. You can walk it, just like we do a normal Kiara, and those blades will be back there clanking around, making a racket, and that sound carries. It really does. The other thing you can do is just throw it out and just straight retrieve it. Like if you're fishing with the kids or you're teaching somebody how to frog fish and they just can't get the walk down, just throw it out and wind it back. You'll hear those blades back there just dink, 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 banging into each other, and it just calls fish. It really does. This comes in a bunch of really cool colors. This is the most ghosty looking of the bunch, but it also comes in a straight chartreuse. You guys know how much Tim and I like straight chartreuse on a frog. It comes in a bunch of really cool and really unique colors that they don't have in the regular Kiara. So I'm just double stoked on it. Really, I mean, that is one of my favorite products to come out of the entire ICAST show. Talking rods, reels, baits, all of it. I'm very excited to throw that S2 beat. I think that needed to happen. It's really cool that it's here. All right, next one up. Rapala at the show got into soft baits. They came out with a handful of soft baits. They call it the Crush City line of baits. Okay, and I've gotten a chance now to play with all of those baits. And the one that I think hits the hardest is this one that they call the Mayor. Let me pull one of these guys out of here. So they did these with Jacob Wheeler. This is Rapala and Jacob Wheeler's line of baits. So the Mayor is their swim bait. They had like 5 different shapes. They had a couple of, like a craw shape, a creature shape, like a chatterbait type trailer, like a straight tail, a Ned bait, and then a swim bait. And the swim bait, the Mayor, it comes in a 3-inch and a 4-inch. And I've already fished them quite a bit. And I will say the 3-inch, I mean, it's a true standout bait. It's really, really cool. Out of the bunch, that was the one where I'm like, I need that one. That one is special. It does something different. It's made out of a different material. It's definitely a stretchy material, but it's also, it's coming off in my fingers. It is loaded with salt. Tons and tons of salt in it. So even though it's stretchy, it's got a different feel to it. Oh man, we've got a breeze going all of a sudden. It is baking out here. That's why we're in the shade right now. It is baking. That feels good. So this bait, 2 things that stood out to me. One, it will swim at ultra slow speed. I mean, way, way, way slow. I was shocked how slow it would go. I had it on a little 1/4-ounce ball head, and I was just pitching it and swimming it on the side of the boat. And then I pitched it and didn't swim it. I just let it pendulum swing. And even on just the pendulum, it swam on its own. Like a good swim, a hard swim. It looked good, even just penduluming. I was very impressed. On a normal retrieve though, throw it out there, winding it back. Not only does it have a great swim, it's got a great body rock to it as well. Very, very unique action. And the 4-inch also looks good, but the 3-inch is like next level good. It's really a standout. You guys know how much we love the Largo Shad. Like profile wise, I would say this, well, that's a 3.5 Largo, so it's not a good comparison. But profile wise, the Largo and the Mayor are very similar profiles. But this is like, the Largo is like a super hard thump, where this is a more subtle thump, plus even more body roll. Just a very unique one too. I think it absolutely has a place in the lineup and is a bait that you're going to see me throw a lot in the future. And it comes in a bunch of colors. You know, sometimes when somebody does a new product launch or goes into a new category, like Rapala coming into soft baits is pretty new, right? So a lot of times when they do that, they'll bring like a black and blue, a green pumpkin, a watermelon red, right? I was very happy to see a ton of really, really good colors in those baits. Next up, Nishini, the Chippewa XDD, Extra Deep Diver. Nishini is a brand that we silently applaud a lot. Tim and I both really like their stuff. It seems like every time they come out with something new, we catch fish on it. It's just that simple. Little tiny company, just a couple of guys making good stuff that catches fish. So I was really stoked to see them enter that, you know, true deep diver category. Giant bill on this bait. A giant bill. But it's trying to make a pretty good size, pretty thick bodied dive. So it's not like this is like a 30-foot diver or something. I think they say like 14 to 16. Is that what they call? Yeah, 14 foot is what they call. But I'm sure you go down to lighter line, you're getting a lot deeper. It's a bait that I'm going to be spending more time with, okay? So I have not put a ton of time into it yet. Kind of a first look for you. Some of this stuff I've already fished a pile. I mean, I've put a ton of time on. Some of it, like this, is more of a first look where I was at the show and was like, yes, that looks fantastic, and I can't wait to put a bunch of time into it. And if it's one of those things, I'll tell you. And this is one of those things where I haven't gone out and just lit the world up on it yet, but I have so much history of catching them on everything that brand comes out with that when I saw this, I saw a unique bill shape, unique design. They're obviously reaching towards the limits of what you can do with a small body crankbait in terms of how deep you can get it to run. I mean, just yes, 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 I want to try that bait. And I figured some of you would too. So very interested in that. Next one. This is cool. As if everything else wasn't. From Sunline, this is Model FC. It's fluorocarbon. Cheap. Well, is cheap the wrong word? Are you supposed to say budget friendly or affordable? It's cheap fluorocarbon. Like, seriously, it is. I mean, I didn't go look at every single fluorocarbon on the market, but to my knowledge, it is the cheapest, least expensive fluoro that you can buy. If a guy is traditionally a mono guy and wants to dabble in fluoro but doesn't want to just break the bank, because fluoro is expensive, this is as economical as you're going to get. Last year, Seagar came out with Basics, a super affordable fluorocarbon, and this is even a little bit less expensive than that, which is really cool to see. It fishes fine so far. I mean, I'm not going to stand here and say like this is the best fluorocarbon I've ever fished with. That's not what they're after. They just want to allow an entry-level angler or somebody who hasn't dabbled with fluoro yet to try it without spending a fortune. And you need it to be a quality line so you can see what fluoro is about. And I think that that's fantastic. I'm really happy to see this on the market. And I think it will help more people bridge that gap, get into fluorocarbon. And then if you like fluoro, you know, of course, over time, you're going to try some of that higher end fluorocarbon and you'll start understanding the differences. But as a user-friendly, cost-effective way to check out fluoro, that Model FC is good stuff. Next one, these are cool. From VMC, the Swinging Ned Rig Jig Head. Swinging Ned. Let me pull one out. I don't know if it speaks to you instantly or if I'm going to have to explain why it's so cool. But here's the deal. The concept here, in my mind, is super simple. The Ned Rig, we typically want those baits standing up. Some baits stand up more than others, right? Some are made of floating plastic, some aren't. But the idea with the Ned Rig is you want to throw that thing out there and you want it sticking up off the bottom, and then those fish will scoop that thing up. And we keep it pretty simple beyond that. Well, not all bottom is flat. Not all baits want to stand up really well, right? Some float higher than others. And then one other thing is we, speaking for Tim and I, and most people, tend to throw our Ned Rigs on the lightest head that we can get away with. Well, part of why you're doing that is because you do want that bait to stay at least partway up. If you go to a really heavy head, it's just more likely that you're going to weigh the bait down. It's just going to sit flat on bottom. You want that thing sticking up. The cool thing here is that because it is free swinging, the hook is free swinging from the weight, no matter which size you're using, if you're using a floating plastic at all, it's going to stand straight up. And where that really shines, like this, I opened the 1/16 ounce to show you that little guy, but where it really shines is like, here's a 1/4 ounce. If I'm here on the Tennessee River, if you're up in, you know, New York, chasing the smallmouth on the rivers, so many different situations where the wind is blowing. It would be nice to have a heavier head, but it just screws up the action of the bait, so you live with it, or you don't throw a Ned rig. Now, it doesn't matter if I'm throwing a 1/16 or a 1/4, my bait is going to sit on the bottom the exact same way. It's gonna sit perfect regardless. So now I can throw that Ned on a heavier head, in current, or while the wind is blowing, or in deeper water, and not have to worry about that screwing up the action of the bait, which now you understand why I think that is so cool. All right, with that, I think the rest of these are kind of creatures and worms. This first one is a major, major deal. Yamamoto 5-inch Senko. Who hasn't caught a fish on one of those? Nobody. Everyone throws a 5-inch Senko. This is the 5-inch fat Senko. This is smart. If you're a guy fishing in 5 feet of water, you've never noticed the problem with a 5-inch Senko, because you throw it up there, it sinks a little, the fish eat it. But if you are a reservoir guy and you've ever thrown a Senko off the end of a point, you need to throw the 5-incher to get them to eat it in the clear water. But my gosh, the next 45 seconds of waiting for that thing to get to the bottom are brutal. So they came out with a 5-inch fat Senko. It's profile-wise, it's a lot like the 6-inch. They said it was 25% thicker than a standard 5-inch Senko. Just a little faster fall, little more presence. You know, I understand it. You can see it better on forward-facing sonar. I'm sure those are some of the things that they were going for with it. But where it speaks to me is just being able to be more connected to that Senko, whether that's in deeper water or when the wind is blowing. Because we've all been on a Senko bite where that wind kicks up and you're like, I just can't keep doing this. I am tired of watching my bait drift. It's just too hard to stay connected to it. But that fatter version, a little bit heavier, a little bit more going on there, you're gonna be able to stay more connected to that bait in more situations. And because it is still a 5-inch, you're not giving up any of those bites. I think Yamamoto, quite frankly, was a genius to make this bait. I do. I think that's awesome. All right, these are in no particular order here. Next one up from Rains. Rains just came out with their 3.5-inch bubbling craw. You guys know how much Tim and I like the 2.5 ring craw. If you've watched any Bait Finesse video this whole year, you know how much we love that bait. It crushes fish. This is a cool profile. So this is a 3.5. But as 3.5-inch creature baits go, it's tiny. They've done some things here that are really unique and that I think are really special. We all know that fishing is changing. There's a lot more pressure. There are fisheries that have never had pressure that are getting pounded now. There's fisheries that have always had pressure and now you can't hardly get bit. So that's one of the reasons that we throw Bait Finesse so much now. But that's one of the reasons that we either go tiny or giant, right? We're fishing the extremes and spending less time in the middle. It's cool that Rains came out with this bait because it's a 3.5-inch bait, but its profile is very, very small. The actual center of the bait is not much bigger than the 2.5 ring craw that we throw. It's not that much bigger. But what they've done is they've added this thin outer edge all the way around that has bulked up the overall profile. So like laying on the bottom, it's fairly substantial, but the meaty part of the bait is actually really small, which is a cool concept. So you're going to be able, if you wanted to throw this on crazy light line, smaller hooks than you could normally throw in this size profile because of the way they've done that. So I'm seeing all the way down to a Bait Finesse application, But I think probably the coolest application here is either going to be as a jig trailer or as a free rig bait. And I think it was really forward thinking. The more of these finessier type baits, but in full size profiles, like a 3.5, that's a fair size bait. That's a good bass size. But it's a small 3.5. I think it's really smart. You throw that on a free rig, let that thing slow fall in there. These claws are substantial, so you're gonna get a really subtle movement out of those. I really think that that is a neat design that's very unique and very well thought out, especially given the circumstances that we're faced with on so many of our lakes right now where fish are feeling the pressure. Next one. Speaking of feeling pressure. All right, you know what? I'm gonna grab both of these. You guys know how much Tim and I like the TMAC as a shaky head worm. The NetBait TMAC is an unbelievable shaky head worm. We also like the CMAC, which is the curly tail worm. I like to Texas rig that CMAC. I fish it. There's 3 bass just swimming by me right here. Just came in here cruising. They're probably chasing bait. 4 bass. Nice. I have nothing. I have all these baits. I have nothing tied on. I've got rods with nothing on them. And I'm dying. I'm dying here. I'm just watching these bass swim. It's all right. I'm going to catch them later. So the TMAC and the CMAC. I was thrilled when we were at the show and went into the NetBait booth and I saw a smaller CMAC and a bigger TMAC. So the CMAC comes in big sizes, like is it an 11 and a 15? They're big worms. Now they make a 7, which is great. I'm really happy to see that size. I think that was a really good move. And of course, anything new coming out of NetBait has bait fuel scent in it, which if you're not familiar with bait fuel, you've been living under a rock the last year, but it's an actual scientifically designed scent to help fish want to eat a bait. They actually studied what will fish take in and actually consume, and they're putting that into plastics where these fish actually want to eat that. It doesn't just smell good or taste good. It's like it's food. So that is in there. The bait fuel is in that, which is really cool. And then the other one in the TMAC, they came out with, super stoked on this. It's by no mistake, I walked out of there with June bug in all these worms. The Magnum TMAC. Genius. So stoked to see that. The TMAC is just one of those fish catching baits. It just gets them, but I'm looking around for the bass. They're swimming over here now. It's like an aquarium right here where I'm sitting. The TMAC is such a fish catcher, but there were times where I do want a bigger profile and they didn't have it. And now they've got that Magnum size, which is really cool. We've got 3 more to go here, guys. Hang with me. Next one, night and day different. This is from Evergreen. This is an 8-inch worm, but it is the smallest 8-inch worm you're ever going to see. This is the bow worm noodle. Tiny little worm. Straight-tailed, kind of a pointy tail there on the end of it, but a very, very thin profile. I mean, here it is compared to that 5-inch fat Senko. I mean, completely different profiles. But the idea here is the same exact thing. Fish are getting more and more pressured. And being different matters, being smaller matters. Now, in this case, an 8-inch worm is not smaller, but it's so thin, it is much smaller than what these fish are used to seeing. You can go to a super light nose hook or even a wacky hook in this bait. I mean, I think that probably the most logical way to fish this bait is a nose hook on a drop shot. And then you're talking about a complete size profile that bass in your water just do not see. They've never seen before. Because nobody in the US has a worm this thin that I'm aware of. And if they do, they most certainly don't make it in an 8-inch size, right? It's just completely different than what our fish have been seeing. And I love to see something like that coming over here where we can adapt and try and catch these fish from a different angle. Two more for you, both from Yamamoto. This is the Oaky Worm. It's a 10.5-inch worm. So this is a big worm, but it's a straight tail. And then so it's necks down. I would say it's about like a 5-inch Senko in terms of size, diameter, because we all know what a 5-inch Senko is like. It's about like a 5-inch Senko all the way back to here. And then all of a sudden it gets really thin. And then you've got a bulbous tail on there. Now this is made out of their really high floating material. So this, I mean, this worm is standing up. You can throw this on a Magnum shaky head or a standard shaky head and you're standing up on the bottom, period. And then because you've got that thin section and then that bulbous tail, if you want to work that bait, you're getting a ton of movement out of that worm. I mean, I've been very impressed with a bunch of the brands this year, but Yamamoto in particular, I mean, they came out swinging at this show with some really cool stuff. And I think these worms are completely in stock. I think you can get them today. Again, some of this stuff you can get today. A lot of it you have to pre-order. That's just the way ICAST works. Some of it people will launch it and it comes out right then and there. Some of it comes out a week later. Some of it comes out 6 months later. And it's a bummer. You've got to wait for it. But I'm pretty sure that's available right now. And then last but not least, the Yamamoto Yama Tanuki. Which the Yama Tanuki is in a brand or in a category of baits. I've heard them called poop baits. I've heard them called gravity baits. I've heard them called heavy baits. Whatever you want to call it, that category of baits, there were a ton of entries into that category at ICAST, a ton. A bunch of brands put something into that gravity bait or poop bait or whatever you want to call it. There's a bunch of entries there, and there was a lot of drama around that, frankly. This ICAST had more drama in it than probably any other I've attended, where either people felt like a product got ripped off, or it wasn't different enough, or credit wasn't given to somebody. And in some of those instances, I think that they were absolutely right. And in others, I think that that was way overshot, that the products were totally okay and had a place in the market. But regardless, Tim and I don't get involved in any of that. We don't. When we go to a place like that, we are there for you guys, and we're there for our own tackle addictions. And we're there to find the gems, to find the different. And there was so much of that there. But the reason why I bring that up now, and we'll get to this bait in just a second, is that there were so many entries in that category that I don't even want to try and lump them into this video. So we, at some point, I have not got my hands on all of them yet. I got my hands on a lot of them. At some point, we'll take all the baits in that category, in the poop category, for lack of a better term, and I think we'll do an underwater video with them. I mean, we'll compare them and we'll see what the differences are, how these different baits move, and we'll try to figure out where each one shines, because there are so many baits there now. They're there for a reason. The category works. They are fish catching baits. And there's enough of them now that we need to, and you need to, understand the differences between them so we can figure out the best applications for the bait. So that'll be a whole separate thing that we do at some other time. But that brings us back to our last bait, which is the Yama Tanuki, which came out at the Classic, was so popular. And they now have come out with a smaller 2.5-inch version of that bait, which is awesome because it's a tiny little bait. You could throw it on a Ned, you could throw it on a little tiny Texas rig, but it's designed to be fish weightless. This is a bait that you're going to put on a little wide gap hook. You throw it out there and they sink pretty quick. They're called gravity baits or heavy baits for a reason. They're like the opposite of a Senko. The Senko is all about that beautiful fall to the bottom and the fish just come out and eat them. These gravity type baits, to me, you want to get them to the bottom. After that, everything is about how you work them. When you twitch them or pop them and the way they come up off the bottom, really erratic, and then fall back down, the fish react to them. But this is a smaller version of that already insanely popular Yama Tanuki. And I think it's cool because in this size, I mean, I could even see, forget the Texas rig, I could even go to like running a nose hook inside it, throwing this on Bait Finesse on 5-pound line for super line shy fish on flats. I mean, There's a bunch of things I have in my mind that I can do with this that I think are really cool outside of even what it was designed for. But guys, with that, we have hit the end of this gear review. So many awesome things came out at ICAST, so much good stuff there. If you missed the video we just did on rods and reels, definitely go back and check that. I'll link it in the video description. This is the first deep dive into the baits. There probably will be more in another month or two, simply because it's going to take us time to gather those baits up, fish them, spend time with them, get to know them. But these were some of the gems that we just had to have right away. I think some of these will probably speak to everybody, right? Not every category here fits your style. You probably don't need a Magnum Shaky and a tiny little finesse worm, or a deep crank and a finesse swim jig. Maybe you do. Maybe you fish as many places as Tim and I do. Maybe you travel constantly and you're always seeing different situations. That's why we have to have it all. But for the average guy, you'll see this video and there's a bait or two or three that might make a really tangible difference in the way that you fish. And that's why we take the time to do this. And I hope that if you heard one of those baits go by, we saved you a whole bunch of time and money and effort trying to track that down on yourself, buying all this stuff to see which ones do fit your style. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.